You ever been on one of those long-haul flights where the air is stale and everything is just quiet? That dead silence got shattered like a pane of glass. I was mid-flight, somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, heading from Newark, New Jersey, to London, England, when I heard this sound. It was this tiny, almost squeaky voice from a woman, just barely audible over the hum of the jets. "Excuse me, did you just do something?" she asked. But it wasn't her voice that sliced through the air. It was the noise that followed. A dry, sharp sound echoed through the whole cabin. Every single passenger's head snapped to the same spot. We were on an international flight, smooth as glass, no turbulence, nothing. Mid-afternoon. And the only sound was that one, harsh slap. It was totally out of place. The woman who got hit was probably in her early 30s. She had a neat, short haircut, sat ramrod straight, and wore a light gray cardigan over a cream-colored dress. Minimum jewelry, simple makeup. She was just looking out the window, minding her own business. The flight attendant, a real piece of work, honestly, was chewing her out because the passenger hadn't handed back her empty plastic cup. "I asked you, like, 6 times, didn't I? Were you deaf? Just ignoring me?" The flight attendant spat the words out, raising her hand again, not with anger, but with pure, cold contempt. The rest of us? We were frozen in our seats. The vibe in the air was so messed up, all we could do was hold our breath. The woman who got hit didn't say a darn thing. She just lowered her eyes, pressed her lips together a little, and stood up, calm as you please. Not a single person offered a word. The only sounds were the background noise of the plane, the low hiss of the air conditioning, some kid whining, the distant drone of the engines. It all felt swallowed up by her silence. But then, the unbelievable happened. "Flight engineer Mike Rodriguez, please report to the cockpit immediately," boomed over the intercom. The flight attendants, who had been totally checked out a second ago, actually flinched. But the slapped woman, Evelyn Reed, didn't hesitate. She started walking down the aisle. Her posture was perfect. With every step, the heel of her leather shoe gave a light tap on the floor. A faint scent of jasmine passed by the people she moved past. It was like nothing had even happened. Wait, what? The cockpit? Wasn't she the one who just got smacked? Murmurs followed her, but she didn't turn around. Deep in her calm eyes, you knew there was a memory, a steel-plated conviction, that nobody else knew about. The cockpit door opened. The pilot and the co-pilot stood there, their faces tight with stress and urgency. "You actually made it, Evelyn?" the pilot asked. Evelyn just nodded. The passengers were completely confused and amazed. The woman who had just taken a silent slap was now being called in as the one who might save the plane. And she still hadn't spoken a single word. Was that silent strength? Or was it pain? We wouldn't know the answer right away. But everyone felt the same thing, whose pride got smacked in that moment. She was slowly swallowed by the cockpit. The cockpit door closed softly behind her. The narrow light coming from inside played gently on her face. In contrast to the noisy cabin, it was cold and quiet in there. "Thank you for coming," said the pilot, a man in his early 50s with a salt and pepper beard and deep wrinkles. But his eyes were sharp, staring at her without blinking. "You got here faster than we expected." "Status report," Evelyn said. It was the first time she had spoken, and her voice was steady and to the point, as if the incident in the cabin was ancient history. The co-pilot pointed at a monitor. "The flight computer's out temporarily. The autopilot is unstable. We tried all the tricks, but the comms are delayed, too. The captain's keeping it under manual control, but we need another pair of hands. Air traffic control in Boston signed off on you joining us." There was a pause. She stood next to the pilot's seat and peeled off a pair of thin gloves. On one of her slender fingers was a small scar, a sign of past training, of a life spent gripping controls. "You take the controls. The captain and I will back you up. We're counting on you, Evelyn." Not a single crew member had heard that designation in the cabin. The people who had just seen her as a passenger couldn't imagine her title. Evelyn Reed was an active pilot in the U.S. Air Force, one of the select few who had civilian airliner experience during emergency training. They wouldn't announce that on the plane, and she wouldn't mention it either. She answered because she was needed. That was it. Let's go over the procedure, then. She looked at the monitors with the captain. As she read off the checklist in a calm tone, the noise from the cabin started to fade. The crew could hear the change in her voice. The directions coming from the previously expressionless woman were as precise as an experienced pilot's. "Who is she?" one of the younger flight attendants whispered. No one could answer. In the back, the flight attendant who had slapped her was sitting silently, staring at the cockpit door. She looked like she wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come out. "Final check complete. All right. Now it's just a matter of holding it until landing," the pilot said, his voice crackling over the radio. The fate of the plane was in her quiet hands and her cool judgment. Just that. But no one in the cabin realized the real test of this flight was still ahead. Switching to manual control, she said quietly, reaching for the yoke. Her bare hand settled on the cold metal. At that instant, a rush of old memories flashed through her mind. That sound. The wind resistance. The feeling of the seat harness. The G-force during a turn. And the taste of failure. Your attitude control is too slow. How many times do I have to tell you? The cold air of the hangar stung her skin. The eyes of the male pilots were merciless, sometimes even laced with ridicule. She took it silently. No excuses. She hardened her will, sharpened her judgment, and gripped the controls again. Women don't make it in the field, she'd heard that a million times. Her answer was always the same, "I'll do it anyway." Her effort paid off. She logged double the training hours, pushed herself to dehydration in the simulator, and became the youngest pilot to qualify for emergency response. But she never felt pride. It was a world where pride got you laughed out of the room. So, she always responded with silence, refusing to argue with words, instead using her skill and her response. That quiet strength had carried her to this day. Now, that skill was being tested again. The warning lights on the console, the wind speed, the air pressure, the fuel gauge, they all showed subtle deviations. But her fingers didn't hesitate. She moved the controls as if reading a piece of sheet music. The co-pilot next to her gasped softly. "You really are military, aren't you?" "Yes. That's all," she answered, short and clipped. But beneath the surface of her voice, you could hear the weight of all those days of hard work. She glanced out at the sea of clouds, the endless white reminiscent of the training airspace far away. The day the training jet nearly crashed due to engine failure. She hadn't given up, landing the plane at the last second to save the life of the junior officer with her. But that officer had quit the military shortly after, saying she couldn't go back into the sky. Those words still hurt. If I had been better. The guilt never faded. That memory sometimes surfaced while she flew. But she didn't carry it as pride, she carried it as responsibility. And now, the heavy weight of that responsibility was in the controls she gripped. "Evelyn, the course is stable." "Correction confirmed," the co-pilot announced. She nodded silently. The act of flying itself spoke the truth, the past wasn't dominating her, it was forming her. Just then, a commotion erupted outside the cockpit door. "Why is she flying the plane?" "She's just a passenger." It was a flight attendant's voice. Evelyn closed her eyes. The yoke in her hands answered for her, vibrating slightly. 2 hours and 40 minutes until scheduled landing. The air is stable. The co-pilot calmly read the status. She nodded and touched a switch lightly. Her movement was quiet and precise, like playing an instrument. But the tension in her fingers was invisible. Outside, it was dusk, the clouds painted in a stunning gradient of gold and indigo, a beautiful, fleeting sight. Inside the cockpit, the atmosphere was tight. The automatic systems were only partially restored. Electrical systems were still glitchy. Yet, she meticulously checked each one, planning her next move. Oxygen pressure dropped 22%. There might be an issue with the ventilation system. Activating the backup circulation filter. Roger that, Evelyn. In the quiet exchange, the pilot and co-pilot's respect for her grew. The woman who was a mere passenger minutes ago was now on the front lines, protecting the aircraft. Her voice carried unquestionable authority, a quiet command that started to change the air in the cabin. Outside the cockpit door, the flight attendants were whispering. No way, she's really a military pilot. So when that jerk slapped her, she wasn't just some random passenger, was she? A remorseful silence fell over them. It wasn't guilt, but confusion at the reality that they had completely misjudged her. But one person remained stationary, the attendant who had done the hitting. She sat stiffly, unable to speak, staring hard at the cockpit door. Why is it like I'm the bad guy? A sound escaped her, but no one heard. She was refusing to be the villain. I'm not wrong. You didn't react or apologize, so why am I the one getting blamed? You all don't know anything. At that moment, the plane rocked violently. Go back to your seat, the co-pilot yelled. But the attendant kept talking, her voice cutting through the cabin. Why do people like you get to be a hero? Just because you can fly, everything is forgiven? Her voice tore into Evelyn's past. I heard you caused an accident once. Dragged someone else down with you. The air in the cockpit instantly froze. Evelyn's hand trembled slightly. That was a secret she had never told anyone. If I had made the call sooner that day, my wingman wouldn't have fallen from the sky. Get out, the captain's voice was low, a quiet but firm rejection. The flight attendant bit her lip and backed away. But her words hung in the air, exposed. A new storm had begun in Evelyn's heart. Evelyn, are you okay? The co-pilot asked. She gave a short nod, unable to speak. She felt like if she did, the emotion caught in her throat would overflow. Instead, she gripped the yoke tighter, her damp palm digging into the metal. I still have to fly. She fixed her eyes forward, on the clear path beyond the lightning, knowing she needed control, not emotion, to survive. The sky was still dark, they hadn't yet passed the layer of storm clouds. But the sound of the wind was starting to soften. She took a slow, deep breath. The back of her seat squeaked faintly. The temperature in her hands, which had been cold, clammy, and even shaking, started to return to a calm warmth. Evelyn, the course is steady. The turbulence is decreasing. Drop the sensitivity adjustment to level 4. Copy that. The tension in the co-pilot's voice was easing. After the scene, despite the lack of words, trust in her judgment and skill had begun to show. Small, quiet operational sounds filled the cockpit. Click, whir. Every movement of her hands over the console brought the plane's movements back to a human touch. It was a strange feeling, the machine adapting to a person's will. The cold metal feels warm now, the co-pilot murmured. She didn't reply, just closed her eyes briefly and let out a quiet breath. Hesitation was definitely in that sigh. The attendant's words, dragged someone else down. A memory she'd never shared. Yet, she shook it off, forcing herself to focus on flying. I can't change the past. But right now, at this moment, I have pride in the skill that holds these lives. A moment later, the captain spoke. This plane has carried a lot of excellent people, Evelyn, but I believe you are, without a doubt, one of them. Thank you. But this is just my job, she replied. No, it's not, the captain insisted. But his brow furrowed. Another error popped up on the monitor. Is the radar failing again? No, this is different. Something's approaching, she said, her eyes fixed out the window. In the distance, beyond the clouds, was a faint light. It wasn't an airplane's light. Before she could say the next word, the radio became a mess of static. Crackle. SSSSSHHHH. Like something was jamming it. What is happening? Then, the next test came. Turbulence is getting worse. We're showing a large thunderhead ahead, the co-pilot shouted. Her fingers tightened on the yoke. For a split second, her sweaty palm slipped. Easy. Breathe deep. Her lungs filled with air. Her heart sped up, and a thin layer of sweat broke out on her forehead. Still, she remained calm. The sky ahead was a dark, muddy mix of black and gray. Lightning streaked through the clouds, briefly illuminating the world. The rocking plane tilted sharply. Manual correction. Adjusting pitch and angle. Maintain descent. Roger, she said. The outside temperature was -60 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind gusts of 100 miles per hour. Normally, they would avoid this airspace, but fuel was running low. There was almost no room for an alternate route. Her hand squeezed the yoke. She could still feel the faint pressure of the slap on her palm. Not pain. Not resentment. Just the memory of her own silence. She could have fought back, but she didn't. Because she knew it wouldn't have changed anything. Why didn't you get angry then? The question suddenly hit her ear. She turned slightly. The cockpit door was slightly ajar, and the flight attendant was standing there, the one who had hit her. You're a military pilot, flying an airliner. That's a joke. The words poured out, not as an apology or an explanation, but a refusal to be the villain. I'm not wrong. You didn't react. You didn't fight back. How am I the one who is supposed to be blamed? You all don't know anything. The plane rocked violently again. Get back, the co-pilot screamed. But the attendant didn't stop. People like you get called a hero? Is everything forgiven just because you can fly? Her voice ripped open Evelyn's past. I heard a rumor you caused an accident. Took someone down with you. The air in the cockpit stopped. Evelyn's hand shook. That was the one secret she had guarded. If I had decided faster that day, my friend wouldn't have fallen from the sky. Leave, the captain's voice was a low, quiet refusal. The attendant bit her lip and retreated. But the words she had left behind were a clear violation. A different kind of storm was beginning to rage in Evelyn's heart. Evelyn, are you all right? The co-pilot asked. She gave a short nod. She couldn't speak, afraid the emotion would overwhelm her. Instead, she gripped the wet yoke tighter, her hands digging into the steel. I have to keep flying. She focused her eyes forward, on the clear path beyond the lightning, knowing she needed the control to survive, not to feel. The visibility was still poor. They hadn't fully cleared the storm. But the sound of the wind was calming down slightly. She took a light, deep breath. The back of her seat creaked a bit, and the warmth returned to her hands resting on the yoke. They had been cold, sweaty, and even trembling moments ago. Now, they were quietly warm. Evelyn, course is stable. Turbulence reduced. Lower the sensitivity level to 2. Copy that. The tension in the co-pilot's voice was noticeably easing. Despite the lack of conversation after the outburst, trust in her judgment and skill was clearly growing. Small operational sounds were the only things heard. Click, click. As she moved her hands over the console, the plane's behavior slowly came back under human control. It was a strange feeling, the machine acclimating to a person's will. The cold yoke felt warm, the co-pilot whispered. She didn't answer, just closed her eyes and quietly exhaled. Doubt was in that breath. The attendant's words, took someone down. A memory she'd never shared. But she pushed it away. Focus on the controls. The past can't be changed. But in this moment, she had pride in the skill that held these lives. Then the captain spoke. This plane has carried many great people, Evelyn, but I believe you are, without a doubt, one of them. Thank you. But this is just my job, she replied. No, it's not normal, he countered. Listen, the second that flight attendant, the one who'd popped her, said that trash about Evelyn's past, you could feel the air pressure drop in the cockpit. I mean, the captain told her to get out, but the damage was done. Evelyn just gave a quick nod to Mike, the co-pilot, but you could tell she was fighting to keep it together. She clamped down on the controls so hard her knuckles were white. Her sweaty palms were basically imprinted on the steel. Gotta fly. Gotta fly. Gotta fly. That's all she could be thinking. She kept her eyes glued to the dark sky, searching for a break in the storm clouds ahead. Right now, it wasn't about feelings, it was about the cold, hard mechanics of keeping people alive. The visibility was still a nightmare, but the wind was starting to mellow out a bit. She took a breath. The slight creak of the seat behind her, the return of warmth to her hands on the yoke, it was all a subtle sign of progress. Moments before, her hands were cold and shaking. Now, they were steady and warm. Evelyn, our course is holding steady. The shakes are down. Drop the sensitivity level to level 2, Mike said. I could hear the tension leaving his voice. That little confrontation hadn't been helpful, but it hadn't broken the trust she'd earned. With every tiny adjustment she made, the aircraft started to obey her, like a tired beast finally finding its way home. It was a strange feeling, the machine seemed to be getting used to the warmth of her touch. Man, that cold metal's actually warm, Mike mumbled. Evelyn didn't answer. She just closed her eyes and let out a quiet sigh. You could hear the doubt in that tiny sound. The flight attendant's jab took someone down. It was the secret she kept locked up. But she pushed it away. Concentrate on the flight. You can't change the past. But she knew that the skill in her hands, the one that was saving these lives right now, was something she could be proud of. The captain finally spoke up. He was an old pro, and you could hear the respect in his voice. This jet, in its 35-year history, has flown a lot of top-notch people, but I honestly believe you're one of the best we've ever had in this seat. Thank you, Captain. But I'm just doing my job, she said. This is not just a job, he insisted. Suddenly, his eyebrows shot up. A new error light was flashing on the monitor. What is it? The comms radar again? No. It's something different. Something is coming closer, she said, her eyes locked on the window. Far off, beyond the clouds, was a faint, unnatural glow. It wasn't another plane's running light. Before she could say what it was, the radio went crazy with a static burst. KZZZZT. Rarik. It was like something was actively jamming their signal. What the hell is going on? Turbulence is spiking. We have a massive cumulonimbus cloud right in front of us. Mike yelled. Her grip on the yoke tightened. Her palm slipped on the metal again. Steady. Deep breath. Her heart hammered, and sweat beaded on her forehead. But she was ice cold and in control. The sky outside had turned a nasty mix of black and gray. Lightning bolts flashed behind the clouds, briefly outlining the world. The jet lurched hard. Manual compensation. Adjusting attack angle to 14 degrees. Maintain descent. She commanded. The air temperature was a brutal -55 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind shear hit them at 120 miles per hour. Normally, you'd never go through that. But they were running on fumes, there was zero room for an alternate route. Her hand squeezed the controls. She could still feel the phantom sting of that slap. It wasn't pain or anger, it was the sharp memory of why she hadn't reacted. She didn't argue because she knew words meant nothing. Why didn't you fight back then? The voice came again. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. The flight attendant was back, standing in the open doorway, her face pale. You're a military pilot flying a commercial jet. That's insane. The attendant was unloading. It wasn't an apology, it was her trying to deflect blame. I'm not the bad guy. You stood there like a statue. You didn't give me any reaction. How am I supposed to be the one who gets in trouble? You all have no idea what it's like. The jet dropped out from under them. "Get back to your seat," Mike screamed. But the attendant kept going. "Why does someone like you get to be the hero? You crash planes. You ruined a career. You think because you can fly, everything you did is just erased?" The air in the cockpit sucked out. Evelyn's hand shook visibly. That was the one detail she'd kept buried. "If I hadn't hesitated, my friend Sarah would still be flying. I said get out." The captain's voice was a low growl, a final, cold order. The attendant finally backed away, her face a mask of shame and fear. But her words lingered, a toxic cloud in the enclosed space. Evelyn was fighting two storms now, the one outside and the one in her head. "Evelyn, talk to me. Are you okay?" Mike asked. She just shook her head, unable to trust her voice. She dug her fingers into the metal yoke. "I have to fly." She fixed her eyes on the lightning-streaked darkness, looking for the tiny sliver of clear sky. It wasn't about being strong, it was about surviving. The lightning was right outside the window now. "Evelyn, what is that light?" the captain asked, his voice tight. She was focused on the primary threat, the storm, but she followed his gaze. The light wasn't a warning, it was a cluster of 5 distinct points, moving erratically below the storm layer. "Those aren't airliners. They're too low. Too fast," Mike muttered, leaning in. "It looks like searchlights," Evelyn whispered, her voice barely audible. But who would be running a search pattern in this kind of weather, this deep in the Atlantic? The radio burst to life with a loud, clear, American voice, cutting through the static. "Delta 737, this is Coast Guard chopper, codename Mustang 4. We have a lock on your position. Do you copy?" "Repeat, do you copy?" The captain grabbed the microphone. "Mustang 4, this is Delta 737. We read you weak but clear. We're on manual control. We have a partial computer failure and are in a massive storm cell. We're holding course. Do you have a visual?" "Affirmative, 737. We're the lights you see. We were running a drill when we picked up your distress beacon. We're holding position until you clear the storm. Look, you guys are flying like a ghost. Who's on the stick?" The captain looked at Evelyn. She was wrestling the yoke, correcting for a brutal wind shear. "We have a temporary co-pilot. She's getting us through," the captain said into the mic. "Well, tell her to keep up the great work. We're running point for you to the alternate landing site. We've got a window open at Atlantic City International." Atlantic City. That was a much tighter approach than London Heathrow. It was a civilian and military field, though. Atlantic City International. "Roger that, Mustang 4. Switching navigation to your vector," the captain confirmed. Evelyn didn't react. She had been here before, a lifetime ago. A sudden switch, a shorter field, and a storm. It was the scenario that had ended her friend's career. Her past, her guilt, was right there in the face of her present duty. "Landing checklist," she ordered, her voice firm, silencing the buzzing fear in the cabin and the noise in her head. What else would you like to see happen to Evelyn and the crew as they approached the new runway? Man, when I saw her standing there, fighting that storm, it hit me, the little girl who was watching her back in the cabin, it was like looking at a mirror of my own past self. That tiny kid's eyes were like a shot of adrenaline. The story, Chapter 3. I saw her look over at the captain, but she just gave a quick shake of her head. Evelyn had a job to do. That little girl's gaze wasn't just a heavy responsibility, it was a promise of the future. Someone was watching her, believing in her. I gotta stay calm and be strong for her. She told herself that as she turned back to the monitors. The final approach instructions were coming in. "Next up is landing," she said quietly. It was a simple statement, but it dropped into the cockpit like a stone. It wasn't over. That little girl was waiting to see the final act of this flight, and that would be Evelyn's answer. But then, the monitor started screaming at us again. "Captain, the air's getting rough again. An unstable low-pressure zone is moving in over the ocean. Mike yelled. Seriously, again? The kid's eyes were still on her, and Evelyn's back stiffened. The test wasn't over. The final choice was coming. Pressure drop. We're hitting some serious downdraft right ahead, Mike reported. Evelyn reacted instantly. The plane dipped and tilted as if an invisible hand was pulling it down. The air was trying to rip the plane out of her hands, but she didn't panic. The captain was right there, silently supporting her moves. Correcting now, she said softly. As her fingers gripped the controls, the ocean of the past flooded her mind. It was 3 years ago, winter. A training flight over the northern Pacific with a brand new co-pilot. Sudden bad weather, a mechanical failure, and the plane next to them was in trouble. Evelyn saw it first. They were out of control and losing altitude. Through the panicked voices of air traffic control, she changed course instantly, chasing the spinning jet. But she wasn't fast enough. The plane went down. They saved the co-pilot, but he quit. The sky scares me now, he'd said. The investigation cleared Evelyn, no fault. But she knew better. If I had reacted 1 second faster. If I had read the signs deeper. Her choices cost someone's life. Since then, she'd shut down all emotion. No smiles, no anger, no regret. Everything was filtered into cold, hard skill and judgment. That was the only way she survived. Evelyn, you okay? Mike asked. She closed her eyes for a split second. In that blink, she saw the face of the pilot who'd quit. Yes. No problem. Her voice was a slight tremor, but nobody questioned it. Hope he's doing all right. She thought about the note he'd sent once, to Evelyn Reed. Thank you for not giving up on me. The sky is terrifying now, but your back is still one of the things I believe in. Those words had held her together. I won't make that mistake again. I won't lose anyone else to the sky. New strength flowed back into her fingers. Correcting the left wing 10 degrees to match the airflow. We are not entering a forced descent. Roger. With every adjustment, the shaking lessened, and the cockpit gauges stabilized. She wasn't the pilot she used to be. Her judgment was clear. She wasn't frozen anymore. We're about to break through the clouds, Mike said. She gave a small nod. The runway lights would be waiting for them. That sight would be the proof that she had conquered the ghosts of her past. Suddenly, the radio squawked with a strange, unknown signal. Captain, we've got a new signal. Unknown data coming in. Mike reported. The communication failure was happening again. It felt like the start of a whole new ordeal. The noise is a mess, can't be decoded. It's coming from outside, but it doesn't match normal air traffic codes. The captain quickly switched frequencies, but the noise wouldn't stop. KSSSHHH. Crackle. Ping. Was it just radio interference, or something else? Warning lights flashed on the monitor. It's not an emergency beacon. No signs of jamming. Just a weird frequency. It sounds like old military comms, but the code's used. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. She knew that sound. It was the same one recorded on the last communication log of the plane that went down. The one her friend was flying. No way. She closed her eyes, shaking her head slightly. Now was not the time to chase ghosts. The flight and the lives on board were the priority. I'm ignoring the comms and focusing on the controls, she stated. The captain next to her quietly said, You being on this plane, Evelyn, I think that's what I'd call destiny. She listened silently. I heard what that flight attendant did. It's unacceptable. But you didn't argue. You just came in here and did what was necessary. No, it's more than that, the captain insisted, looking down at her hands. I can feel it, even in this turbulence. Your hands haven't given up on any life on this jet. A silence fell between them, but it was a comfortable one. The air was still rough outside. Light filtered through a break in the clouds, catching her cheek. "Why do you keep flying?" the captain asked suddenly. It wasn't a question from a boss to an employee, it was one pilot to another. Evelyn looked out, past the white clouds over the ocean, to the faint lights of the runway. "If me flying means someone can land safely and feel steady ground under their feet, that's enough reason for me to keep going." Her voice was calm, but the conviction in that quiet statement was steel-hard. The captain nodded, the kind of silent understanding only pilots share. The air smoothed out a bit. Engine vibrations lessened, and the rocking stopped. "We can start the final descent in 20 minutes, Mike confirmed. "Roger. Make an announcement to the passengers first." Mike took the microphone and spoke in a calm voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now in stable flight. We are making adjustments for landing at our destination. Please keep your seatbelts fastened and relax." The nervous murmurs in the cabin immediately died down. The anxiety and anger slowly faded away. In that silence, the little girl was looking toward the cockpit again. Her eyes met Evelyn's through the glass. The girl gave a small nod, as if she believed completely in the scene before her. Evelyn felt steady now, but in a corner of the cabin, a different kind of trouble was brewing. She knew what she had to face next when the flight attendant's shadow appeared in the doorway again. "This flight isn't over yet." The attendant, the one who'd slapped her, was standing in the door frame again, clutching the sleeve of her uniform, searching for words. Evelyn didn't turn around. She just kept her eyes on the gauges and the flight path. "Evelyn, the approach air is good. We can start the final descent in 12 minutes, Mike said calmly. "Roger. Final checks." Evelyn's voice was level. Her back had definitely changed. First, it was the back of a woman who just took a hit without flinching. Now, it was the back of a powerful force. Quietly, surely, she was repainting the atmosphere around her. The captain watched her, too. Finally, the attendant took a step toward the cockpit. Her voice was weak, not quite an apology, not quite regret, just a confused plea to take something back. Evelyn still didn't turn. Instead, she offered one quiet phrase, "We are flying right now." The attendant stopped. It was a calm but absolute refusal. No yelling, no reprimand, but the message was colder and deeper than any of that. Evelyn's posture said it all, "My actions are my answer, not your words." A few seconds later, the attendant gave a slight bow and retreated back into the shadow of the door. "Some things are quieter than words, I guess," Mike murmured. "Words don't connect if you already think they won't," she replied. "Still, your back got through to her." She didn't answer. She could feel the wind shift subtly. Her fingers tightened on the controls. A slight shudder ran through the plane, but she was ready. "Wind speed is stable. Preparing for descent." The monitor shifted. 8 minutes until they would be close enough to see the runway. Just then, a guy in the passenger cabin stood up and shouted, "Hey! That lady! The one flying? She's Air Force. She's the one that got hit. She's a hero." Other passengers whipped their heads around and pulled out their cell phones. "Does anyone know her name? This woman is amazing." "But they hit her on the plane, didn't they? Why?" The quiet cabin instantly turned into a buzzing spectacle. But Evelyn didn't react. She was looking straight ahead. The phone cameras, the online noise, the stares, it was all about to swallow her again. But she wouldn't run. She would give her answer quietly. That was her counterattack. Then, the view cleared. Breaking through the clouds, the runway lights appeared in the distance. "There it is." That single phrase seemed to give her back another shot of strength. No more emotional baggage. She was going to land this plane clean. With every eye on her, she decided to answer not with a word, but with a perfect landing. "Air traffic control clears you for approach. Runway 25L. Wind is calm," Mike announced. She quietly tightened her grip on the yoke. Her hands weren't damp anymore. Her rocking heart was now a single point of focus. The jet slowly began its descent. The lights of the city below curved along the coast, shining as if to guide the plane in. Flaps 25 degrees. Gear down, checked. Flaps 25 degrees, gear locked. The whirring of the wheels dropping down echoed through the jet. It was a moment of tension and relief for everyone on board. Landing lights softly illuminated the ceiling of the passenger cabin. No shouting, no noise, the passengers were glued to the forward door. That's the one. The woman who got hit. She's really flying it? She was a military pilot? The whispers of confusion slowly shifted into quiet respect. The little girl looked out the window at the lights and whispered, "She's so cool." Her mother squeezed her hand. She didn't reply, but the message was clear. "Go for it, Evelyn," the captain murmured. She nodded quickly. The numbers on the panel changed with every passing second: wind speed, descent rate, lift, and speed. It was all up to her. Final approach. The nose of the jet lifted slightly. The white lines of the runway stretched out straight before her. It was beautiful. It wasn't just a line on the ground, it was the line connecting her past and her present, the line between guilt and pride, the line of a new beginning. The feel of the wind changed. The lift dropped, and the sensation of touchdown grew closer. Thrust reversers stand by. 100 feet until touchdown. She took one final breath. Without a sound, she settled the aircraft perfectly onto the runway. Thump. The landing was soft, just a small shudder. The friction of the tires, the howl of the reverse thrust, everything converged into a perfect, calculated stop. Landing successful. Clear of runway. Taxiing to the gate. A collective sigh of relief filled the cockpit. The tension was gone. But in the next second, the entire cabin erupted in applause. Clap. 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 It started with one or two people and quickly became a wave. Surprise, relief, and awe were on every passenger's face. "Thank you. We saw you," someone shouted. She didn't answer, didn't look. She slowly took her hands off the yoke. The imprint of her grip remained. "No one's gonna forget this flight," Mike whispered. Then, the captain spoke into the intercom, making a formal announcement. ***, ladies and gentlemen, this landing was performed by Air Force pilot, Evelyn Reed. Silence. For 1 second, all sound stopped. Then, the applause returned, louder and stronger than before. But she remained still. She didn't respond to the applause or the cameras. She just closed her eyes at the back of the pilot's seat, whispering a private thought to herself, this was the right thing to do. But she knew this wasn't the end. The jet was stopped, but the media and the world were just starting to move. The terminal lights reflected in the windows of the plane. The story, Chapter 4. No one moved. Seriously, not a soul in that cabin even reached for a bag or tried to crowd the aisle. They were waiting for Evelyn to stand up. She slowly took off the headset, ready to leave the cockpit. That's when the captain's deep voice cut through the silence. "Just a moment, please." She turned back to see him holding the microphone, the cabin speaker switch on. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for flying with us today. Our landing was successful, and all procedures are complete. Before you deplane, I have one final thing to share." Every eye in the cabin focused on the front. Evelyn's back stiffened slightly. "In handling this emergency, we entrusted the manual landing of this aircraft to a person with specialized skills. Here, where your lives were in our hands, this individual earned our complete trust, made flawless judgments alongside us, and delivered a perfect landing. Her name," he paused, and then spoke it clearly and with respect, "Air Force pilot, Evelyn Reed. We offer you our deepest respect and gratitude." The cabin was still. There was no applause, just a heavy, collective silence. Everyone finally knew her name, and the weight of it was huge. It was a badge of honor and a testament to a history she had never spoken about. In that moment, her silence, her entire ordeal, finally felt justified. She quietly stood up. Step by step, she moved into the aisle, and every passenger watched her. Nobody spoke, but their eyes held genuine respect. The little girl in the window seat waved from the gap between the seats. Evelyn softened her expression just a hair, raising her right hand just slightly. It was her first and last reaction of the whole trip. When she reached the door, the airport ground crew bowed their heads. You could already see the glow of news cameras and the flash of phones. The media storm was rolling in. But she didn't flinch. She ignored the microphones and didn't stop, even after her name was called out. Instead, she glanced back into the cockpit for a fraction of a second. The place where her responsibility and her honor still lingered. Did that person really fly the plane? She's gonna be on the news. That's insane. She didn't say a single word after she got slapped. The murmurs of shock turned into quiet praise. But she didn't acknowledge that either. Silence was her strongest statement. As she headed for the terminal exit, a female staff member approached her. "Evelyn, thank you so much. You earned your rest." Evelyn stopped, meeting the staffer's eyes for the first time. "Thank you. I just flew the plane, that's all." A modest response, yet it contained everything. She walked on, carrying her honor, her scars, and the weight of her name. Everyone watching knew that a name is only as heavy as the silence you keep to protect it. But when she finally looked up, there were still a few clouds left in the sky. Another choice was waiting even after this quiet finish. The aftermath. The news broke less than 10 minutes after touchdown. U.S. Air Force pilot lands commercial jet after being attacked on board. Slapped woman revealed as elite pilot. On the airport lobby monitors, video shot on cell phones in the cabin played over and over, her silent profile, her hand on the controls. There were no words, but her quiet response said everything. Social media exploded. This is American pride. That's real strength. There's a reason she didn't speak. Someone needs to give this woman proper recognition. Reporters swarmed the airport, but Evelyn was gone. They chased empty benches and an abandoned water bottle. She gave no interviews, no quotes, and no emotional reaction to any media outlet. The comment from her Air Force unit was short and sharp: the individual's actions were based on field judgment. Following the completion of the mission, she has returned to her unit under standard procedure. That silence was all the proof anyone needed. Someone wrote, "She didn't speak a single word, but she showed the world the soul, no, the character of this country." They weren't clapping because she got hit, they were clapping because the person who didn't let emotion take over was the right one for a job carrying human life. That was the whole story. Returning to the sky. A few days later, she was back in the briefing room on base, wearing her uniform just like any other day. Her commanding officer just said one thing: "Welcome back." She saluted. "It was just a mission, sir." Her face showed nothing, but her posture carried the weight of something new she had earned. The other pilots didn't say anything, but they all knew the magnitude of her silence. In the locker room, a young trainee worked up the courage to talk to her. "I saw the news. That was incredible, how you stayed so cool." Evelyn just adjusted her uniform collar. "I flew because I can fly. I did it because I was needed. That's all." She didn't say anything more, but the young pilot's face showed a clear resolve: "I want to follow her." As she walked out to the airfield again, she looked just as calm as before the flight, but she was definitely carrying something different. The news eventually faded. The stories moved on. But her strength, the power of the person who didn't get angry, the words of the person who didn't speak, the quiet back of the person who didn't fight, stayed with people. Her silence forced everyone else to search for their own words. Maybe that was the quiet revolution. A new view. The little girl was looking out the window. It was a domestic flight from New York to Miami. The morning sky was perfectly clear. "Mom, is that lady a pilot?" She saw a woman in a uniform walking toward the runway. Straight back, efficient stride, and a small name tag swinging over her shoulder. The girl couldn't read the rank or name, but she felt like she knew her. Her mother smiled. "I'm sure she's a very good pilot. I think I saw her on TV." "Maybe so, sweetie." The girl didn't ask again. She tapped the window with her tiny hand and whispered, "Can I be like her?" The woman walking toward the far end of the runway was, of course, Evelyn Reed. Months after that nightmare flight, she was still flying her military missions, quiet, unchanged on the surface, carrying only her honor. Her story rarely made the news now. The articles disappeared, and the social media feeds moved on, but her back was permanently etched into the memory of someone, somewhere. Her silence, her composure, her judgment, the way she answered with trust instead of anger, in those memories, she would always be the one who stood up. The girl whispered again, "Pilots are cool." This time, her mother didn't say anything. She simply overlaid the memory of Evelyn's back onto her daughter's words. Flying isn't just about controls, it's about holding lives, connecting hearts, and sometimes, saving someone with the quiet power of silence. Evelyn stopped at the edge of the runway. She looked up at the sky, listened to the wind, and quietly walked toward her jet. The little girl watched her the entire time. No words were needed. That strong back had taught her what real strength was. Somewhere, someone else who wished to be like her would look quietly up at the sky. And the world would change just a little bit, led by the person who guided not with words, but with silence.